Things are getting hairy for Skeet Ulrich and Christina Ricci in this E.T. First.
Hi, E.T. Welcome to the set of Cursed.
Hollywood is known as a dog-eat-dog town, but in their new movie Cursed, Skeet and Christina find that out the hard way when they come face-to-face with a werewolf.
They don't know what it is, and over the next couple of days, they start exhibiting very strange behavior.
We didn't actually see any werewolves when we popped by the Hollywood set, but we were assured they were out there. In theaters next year, audiences can expect a mix of horror and humor with some killer special effects.
I'm sure they'll be scared. I'm sure they'll laugh, and, they'll cry if the ticket prices continue to climb.
We asked Christina if she has a favorite horror movie.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre, because it's so frightening.
Leatherface? Are you kidding me? Also co-starring in Cursed is James Brolin.
Idea.
Yeah, and it happens all the time. And it was just a mess. And
I never even heard of it.
Cursed, yeah, what's good? You didn't hear about it. I'm surprised I'm even mentioning it because it did. They shut the film down. And I went, okay. And I said, but we were doing some really cool transformation stuff, and it wasn't quite done. And I said, listen, if you ever think the film's going to pick up again, if you can keep a number of my people on for another month, we can have this transformation stuff. We'll put it in a box. It'll be ready to go. I said, if they disperse now, it's going to be like starting again because nobody won't necessarily get the same people.
Right.
I know. Just put everything in a box. Ship it to us. If we start up again, we'll figure it out. They started up again. I didn't do it. I was on something else. Someone else took over. They changed everything that I made. They didn't use a lot of what I made.
Wes Craven. After a script was finished in August of 2000, Dimension announced the production of Cursed in the August of 2002 with a planned release date of August 2003. With Wes Craven signed on to direct, Bob Weinstein, now infamous as part of the Weinstein brothers, promised that the film would be a reinvention of the werewolf drama that horror fans had been waiting for. Dimension envisioned this as another franchise for Wes Craven, and much like Scream before it, the hope was that Craven would create at the very least another trilogy, but with the lore of werewolves as the center of the plot this time around. The title of the film is actually quite apropos in this instance because of the issues that the production faced for the movie just to see the light of day. Now, the original plot isn't at all what made it to the screen, and it was said to have centered around three main characters who were strangers brought together by a car accident up in the Hollywood Hills, followed by what would appear to be a werewolf attack. The three characters were to be played by Christina Ricci, Jesse Eisenberg, and Skeet Ulrich, who was set to reunite with Wes Craven after what was arguably his most well-known performance in 1996's Scream. Just how much of the original version of Cursed was shot is up for debate, but rumor has it virtually an entire film was shot. Here's what eventually made it to the screen. Cursed, as we know it, centers on Ellie, played by Christina Ricci, and her brother Jimmy, played by a young Jesse Eisenberg. Out driving one night, they're involved in a terrible car accident on Mulholland Drive. In this already stressful situation, the two are struggling to save a woman who's been trapped under her car from the accident, only to have an unneeded and out of left field appearance by a werewolf ruin their attempts by tearing the trapped woman, played by Shannon Elizabeth of American Pie, to pieces and injuring Ellie and Jimmy in the process. It becomes clear over the course of the movie that the scratches the siblings sustained from the werewolf are part of a deadly curse and would soon transform them into werewolves themselves. Of course, there's much more to the plot than that, like a CGI werewolf dog, the creature being extremely petty and self-conscious, and the curse itself being transmitted during a one-night stand like some kind of folklore STD. None of this seemed quite like what Wes Craven would have intended, and it turns out it really wasn't. Here's how it all went down. Cursed was postponed just 4 weeks shy of wrapping principal photography due to quote-unquote script problems. The Weinsteins had concerns about the film's third act and some of the special effects they had seen. Those quote-unquote script problems resulted in Kevin Williamson, the writer and longtime collaborator of Craven, being ordered to do a complete page-one rewrite of the script based off of new plot points handed down by the studio. Oh yeah, and then there's also everything that went down with Rick Baker. Now, as a horror fan, you have to be familiar with the name, and if you're not, well, come on. Known for doing makeup on The Wolfman and The Howling and being responsible for the effects that brought An American Werewolf in London to life, all of which would have made him arguably the guy for a movie like this, Barker's name is cemented in film history as he is an Oscar winner and a horror legend, which meant exactly nothing to the Weinstein brothers, as Baker was fired from production and his design scrapped. The Weinsteins instead opted to go the all CGI route as opposed to practical effects, and those CGI effects, let me tell you, worth every penny. No. These issues prolonged the production for so long it resulted in several cast members being cut altogether because of long-winded delays caused by many scheduling conflicts. Among the cast lost were Mandy Moore, Omar Epps, Robert Forster, Scott Foley, Corey Feldman, Skeet Ulrich, and even Heather Langenkamp. You heard that right, Heather Langenkamp. Those were two huge Wes Craven reunions the audiences never got to see. We missed out on a whole lot of chemistry in lieu of one jump scare after the other. However, we did still get Scott Baio as himself. So, not all is lost, I guess. Some of the actors that were removed from the story even filmed scenes or finished their dates entirely, but were ultimately cut by Craven because they no longer fit with the many script rewrites that had taken place. Cursed would ultimately go on to see a full 2 years of delays, which not only affected the final product, but ultimately affected the story itself, as the character of Ellie originally started off as a segment producer for The Late Late Show with Craig Kilborn, but by the time the film had come out, Craig Kilborn had already stepped down from his position in late night and had been replaced by Craig Ferguson. Over those 2 years of delays, Bob and Harvey Weinstein repeatedly demanded changes to the plot. The film was written and shot with the intention of it being released with an R rating, as they'd done with the Scream franchise, but in the fall of 2004, Dimension had it cut down to a PG-13 rating in the hopes that a younger audience would flock to see it in theaters, as this was the era of PG-13 horror. They thought that this PG-13 would guarantee them more financial success, but it did not. Although in an odd twist, Canadians actually got to see the R-rated cut in theaters, with the Canadian distributor Alliance Atlantis opting to release that version instead. The film grossed slightly over $19 million at the North American box office and about $10 million internationally, for a worldwide gross of just over $29 million, against a budget of $38 million. Translation: Cursed was a box office bomb. And critics seem to agree with audiences. Based on 96 reviews, it currently holds a 17% on Rotten Tomatoes. The San Francisco Chronicle panned the film, writing Cursed is a third-rate effort with a weak script, cheap-looking effects, and no genuine frights. Film Threat took it a step further, alluding to the film's legacy by stating not only does it not make movie history, until this past Friday the worst werewolf film ever made was Harry Hands Down Mike Nichols' Wolf. Cursed now assumes that dubious distinction, and someone is going to have to try very, very hard to wrestle it away. Just 1 month after its release, Wes Craven could no longer hold his tongue about the experience. When asked by the New York Post if the studio had asked for the PG-13 rating, Craven opened the floodgates, stating, "I'm very disappointed with Cursed. The contract called for us to make an R-rated film. We did. It was a very difficult process. Then it was basically taken away from us and cut to a PG-13 and ruined. It was 2 years of very difficult work and almost 100 days of shooting various versions. Then at the very end it was chopped up and the studio thought they could make more money with a PG-13 movie and trashed it. We were writing while we were shooting. It wasn't ready to film. We rewrote, recast, and had 2 major reshoots. It went on and on and on. After a while I regretted it was called Cursed because, you know what? It was cursed. It was just chopped up and it was awful. I thought it was completely disrespectful and it hurt them, the studio, too. It was like they shot themselves in the foot with a shotgun." In the end, Cursed, like many films before it, was just a prime example of a studio getting too heavily involved and ruining their own product. And while we're on the topic, Cursed is also a prime example of why horror fans don't trust major studios to produce their genre film. Sure, Craven may be a little more commercial than some of our favorites, but who in their right mind would ever trust the creative direction of Bob Weinstein over Wes Craven when it comes to horror? When this edition hits YouTube, the movie will have turned 15 years old. And all these years later, we can all imagine what the film might have been like had Craven just been left to his own devices. Could he have defined another era of horror? Did this film ever have the chance of reinvigorating the werewolf genre? When you take the combination of director, the makeup, special effects artists, and the huge cast that was assembled at the start, the original team behind it alone should have and would have equaled the success. In the end, the production nightmare of Cursed just leaves us with so many questions. Why was the original story changed? Why was the film shut down for such a long story overhaul when it was a mere 4 weeks away from wrapping production? Why would you interfere with the creative process of a veteran horror filmmaker who had delivered for your studio time and time again? If he and the writer of the film had had so much success for your studio in the past, why on earth would you demand so many rewrites and let go of the crew that many would deem as experts in the genre? Lastly, what about the final cut seems better than the original story in any way? In our opinion, Cursed is truly an awful film, but that doesn't mean it's not enjoyable in some ways. Many viewers actually find it quite entertaining, but for all the wrong reasons, sharing clips of the cheesy CGI, the over-the-top performances, and of course, that middle finger. The most frustrating aspect of all is that it had so much promise. It really could have been a reintroduction to a long underused genre of horror, but in the end, the production was cursed from the start. For JoBlo Horror, I'm Chris Bumbre.